Hey, what's up guys, Will here for GSM Arena. Samsung has a wide selection of mid-range phones, and one of their most feature-packed is the Galaxy A52s. But this is the Galaxy M52, which goes for about the same price. What's the difference here, and why should you get one over the other? Let's find out in our full review. The Galaxy M52 is a phone that covers most of the same bases as its cousin, the A52s. But this is an M-series model, and there are a few differences to consider. These mid-range devices are made from plastic, but one neat accent here is the pinstripe texture that sits beneath the flat back panel. This is a different approach from the matte pastel finishes we've seen on Samsung's A-series phones, but you also don't get IP-rated dust and water resistance like you do on the A52s. For whatever reason, Samsung has moved away from the feature that made the previous model, the M51, stand out, the huge 7000 mAh battery. This time around it's 5000 mAh, which isn't small, but it does mean that the M52 was lighter and easier to wield than the previous model. And still, battery life is nothing to sneeze at. The M52 was able to score a great endurance rating of 123 hours, which is a bit better than the A52s, with its smaller 4500 mAh power pack. Charging speed is slower here though, at least with a bundled 15-watt adapter. With it we charged from 0 to 30% in half an hour, but there is support for 25-watt charging, and that bumps things up to 50% in the same amount of time. Another major difference between the M52 and the Galaxy A52s is the size of the screen. It's 6.7 inches here as opposed to 6.5. Otherwise, the screen is comparable as far as specs go. It's an AMOLED with a 1080p resolution, Gorilla Glass 5 protection, and a fast 120Hz refresh rate. This is something that the M51 didn't have, and the extra smoothness is nice, even though the refresh rate isn't adaptive to save energy. Content looks nice here, sharp and contrasty. The color profile is very customizable and can be quite accurate depending on your settings. And brightness is good too. We measured a maximum of 400 nits with the slider, and a boost up to 780 nits in auto mode in bright conditions. Audio also plays a major part in the multimedia experience, but the M52 has just a single speaker, not a stereo setup like the A52s has. The speaker isn't very loud, scoring just average on our charts, and sound quality isn't great, with not much bass, although we do find that the mids are better than the M51s. When it comes to chipset performance, the Galaxy M52 and the A52s are neck and neck, and that's because they run on the same silicon, a Snapdragon 778G. It's a high-end mid-range chip that provides near flagship-grade performance, and both everyday tasks and games run great. By the way, this is a significant upgrade over the previous model, the M51, which ran on a Snapdragon 730G. Storage is expandable on the M52 via microSD over the 128GB built in. And at the time of this video, the Galaxy M52's interface is Samsung's One UI 3.1 over Android 11, which is smooth and clean. You also get a side-mounted fingerprint reader for biometrics. It's worth noting that Samsung is already rolling out its new One UI 4 and Android 12 to some devices, and that will eventually come to the M52 as well. Finally, we have the cameras, which include the same 64MP quad-Bayer main cam, 12MP ultra-wide, and 5MP macro setup as on the M51 and the A52s. This device doesn't have a depth sensor though. Despite having the same cameras, there are some differences in quality thanks to the processing, especially compared to the previous generation. 16MP photos from the main cam are very good for the class, with crisp detail, vivid colors, and reasonably wide dynamic range. Noise is very well controlled too, better than what we saw on the M51. Despite the lack of a depth sensor, the Galaxy M52's portrait mode works without issues, with generally good subject separation. Shots from the ultra-wide are again great for this price point. Dynamic range is wide enough, and here the M52 again does a better job at handling noise than the previous model did. 5MP close-ups from the macro cam are okay. There's no autofocus and there is noticeable noise, but the photos have enough detail, good color saturation, and decent dynamic range. At night, photos from the main cam aren't half bad. They aren't the sharpest around, and there's a fair amount of noise, but there's a good amount of detail and color saturation, and dynamic range is very good. Turning on the main cam's night mode results in a cropped 12MP photo, just like on both the previous model and the A52s. Night mode doesn't really affect the dynamic range much, but you get improved sharpness and definition, and the exposure is slightly brighter. The ultra-wide takes good photos at night, unlike many competitors. There's good detail and sharpness and excellent dynamic range. There is some noise though, and colors are a bit washed out looking. Night mode doesn't have a huge effect as the auto mode shots are already that good. The main difference we noticed is brighter and clearer greenery, like grass and bushes. Selfies are taken with a 32 megapixel front-facing cam that shoots 12 megapixel photos by default. Sharpness and detail are solid in good lighting, and dynamic range is good. Skin tones are a bit inconsistent though. Videos can be captured with the main cam in up to 4K resolution, and the quality is very good, with plenty of detail, low noise, vivid colors, and nicely wide dynamic range. You can also shoot in 4K with the ultra-wide, and these clips are excellent for this type of camera. There's a ton of detail, likable colors, and very good dynamic range. There's no stabilization in 4K though. You can find EIS only in 1080p resolution at 30 FPS, and even then the clips end up rather shaky from movement, especially with the main cam, which displays some focus hunting. This isn't the case for the fixed focus ultra-wide though. So that's the Samsung Galaxy M52 5G. It's a solid mid-ranger offering great battery life and a lightweight build for the size. There's a large, high refresh rate AMOLED, a high-performance chipset, and good camera performance too. We had to compare the M52 to the Galaxy A52s, since they're available for a similar price, and here you do have the advantage of the larger screen and bigger battery. But the trade-off is that you miss out on two features that you'd get on the other model: water resistance and stereo speakers. So overall, we'd have to say that if you're looking for the most bang for your buck, the A52s is the better deal, unless the screen size and battery life are the features that matter the most to you. Thanks for watching guys, stay safe and see you on the next one.